This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Roby Brock. We're glad to have you with us this week. Before the session started, no one was certain if a highway plan might come to fruition, but one did magically emerge successfully out of the session, and we are here to talk about that and several other business issues. I am joined by Shannon Newton, Arkansas Trucking Association's CEO and President, Randy Zook, the President and CEO of the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce and the Associated Industries of Arkansas, the second longest title of anybody in the state of Arkansas. You know who's got the first?
No.
Mervyn Jebaraj, economist and director of the University of Arkansas Walton College of Business Center for Business and Economic Research.
That's a mouthful.
That is great, isn't it? Show's over. There we go. We just did introductions.
That's it.
Thank you for both of y'all for being here.
Thanks
Very much. Congratulations on a successful highway program out of the session. It's not a done deal yet, though. Let's talk about how did it come together? Because at the beginning of the session, I think there was a lot of uncertainty about that, Shannon.
I think, there was a lot of stakeholders. A lot of people had put a lot of effort into this issue. If you think back, we've been talking about highway funding for at least 3 or 4 sessions.
Oh, 3 or 4 decades.
Yes, so much so that we kind of got to the point where we stopped asking because we felt like the legislature was tired of hearing about it. And I think just the general swell of the public support actually pushed us over the edge this time. Leadership from the governor incorporating it into his campaign and making it one of his fortes. I think that certainly set the stage for the impetus for something to actually happen.
Yeah, Randy, your thoughts on where it kind of originated from and how all those stakeholders got to the table and agreed on something?
Shannon's got it right. It's just public opinion. Look, the experience with the highways, that's the most compelling way to sell the need for highway funding is just let people drive on the roads for a while. We all recognize that we've got roads that are in deteriorating condition and bridges that just have to be replaced, that are weight restricted or even marginally safe. So we've got work to do.
When did you know you had a passable solution? Because you're cutting deals, you're talking about what would take somebody's vote to move here and there. When did you know you had something that was going to work?
To be honest, I think the 2 or 3 days that led up to the press conference were pretty intense. You had the legislative proposal, you had the governor's proposal, and you had the stakeholders' proposal, and it was somewhat of a Venn diagram of this is how much, this is how far we're willing to go, and this is what we've got to have to call it a success. And I really think when we stood at the podium and the governor was there, and Speaker Shepherd was there, and Senator Hendren, and you felt like everybody was going to support this plan. I think at that point, I felt like we were over the hill.
All right. So let's talk about some of the elements of the plan here. You've got the wholesale gas and diesel fuel taxes. You've got the hybrid electric vehicle registration fees. You've got some miscellaneous taxes in there that are going to be pensioned from left and right. And the biggie is the half-cent sales tax, making it permanent there. How hard a sell is that going to be?
Well, it's the critical part. It's 2/3 of the total $300 million deal. So basically, we've made a 1-foot jump on a 3-foot ditch so far. So we've got 2 more feet to go. And it's going to be, I think the people are going to be responsive. I mean, they passed it with a strong margin originally, and I think people are used to paying it. It's not an increase, it's a continuation. So people have seen the benefits of what they invested in or agreed to pay for with the tax through the road improvements that we've had, and more to come, more that's already funded. Just, if we ever start on the I-30 project here in Little Rock, maybe we'll see some more benefit from that.
I'm not trying to be negative, Nelly, but what happens if it doesn't pass? You just play with the money that is there.
Right.
Yeah.
I think certainly we'd be we would have a highway funding problem again if it didn't pass. Randy alluded to the substantial portion of the plan is the half-cent continuation. But I think based on the research that we've done, based on the results that the people have seen from the current half-cent and the way that it's set up to continue to feed back into the cities and counties so that people can see results, back home. There's no one that's going to be left out of continuing the half-cent. So I think that combination with putting forward a map, putting forward some big projects that will this funding, this dedicated funding with the pay-as-you-go system will allow us to project and deliver on a lot of things that matter to a lot of
When
our
do you
Kansans.
think we will see what that plan is going to actually look like, what that map is going to look like? I mean, how far away are we from something in that respect?
Gosh, I don't even want to guess. Shannon probably has a
I
better
would say,
guess
I mean,
than I do.
we've had those conversations, and I know that they're working on it now. I would say no later than the fall. I think, the campaign for the half cent probably will kick off sometime a year out
So
from the
who's
election.
involved in that process? Obviously, the Highway Commission is going
Right.
to have to be somewhat of the architects of all that, but how do the stakeholders and the general public, how do they get some input into that?
With respect to the map, is that what
Yes.
you're asking? I think the Highway Department, the Governor's Office has weighed in on some projects that, that they feel are important, and then the Highway Department looks at, where the needs are, where the traffic are, where do we have capacity needs, where do we have maintenance needs, and what it elevates, to the top of the priority list.
They have a really rich data system that tells them where the worst conditions are, and I think they're going to be smart in prioritizing. And obviously, the commissioners are going to have some say there, but there's a pretty narrow lane there when it gets down to it. You know where the real work needs to be done.
Let's flip to some legislative politics surrounding this too. It is unusual for a heavily Republican legislature to vote for tax increases or even referring tax increases. I can remember, I'm old enough to remember when they used to beat people up for just referring taxes to the vote of the people. Do you think we're going to see this play out in some Republican primaries in 2020, that these votes on tax increases will be detrimental to some incumbents?
Again, I think there's just a level of popular public support that's going to strengthen those who referred it and took those votes. They were, difficult votes for orthodox Republicans, but at the end of the day, we've got to have adequate highways, and that overwhelming need is what's going to drive that.
All right, one last question here before we take a commercial break. What else flew under the radar for the trucking industry in this session? This was obviously the 800-pound gorilla. So
Sure.
what else was out there?
Sure,
that
we
you guys
certainly
worked on?
spent most of our time on this particular issue. We did have one other piece of legislation that dealt with safety technology and how that's implemented in fleets that have both company drivers and owner-operators. It was important to us to make sure that there was no detriment to a company that was wanting to deploy that safety technology, but there was no opposition. We flew through unopposed, and that was a priority of ours.
Just an easy session all around, wasn't it, Shannon?
Oh, yeah.
All right, Randy and Shannon, let's take a quick commercial break and come back and talk about some corporate taxes and some other tax policy from this last legislative session. I'm Roby Brock. We're back with more right after this. And welcome back to the program. I'm Roby Brock, joined by Shannon Newton from the Arkansas Trucking Association, Randy Zook from the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce, Associated Industries of Arkansas. Let's talk about taxes.
Sure.
There were a lot of debates about taxes, increases, decreases. The governor got his big income tax push through.
Right.
How's that going to be beneficial to growing the state's economy?
Well, clearly, Arkansas has been classified over the last several years as a relatively high tax compared to our neighboring states. We've been out of step, not only with our state and local sales taxes, where we're pretty high still, but also especially so with our income taxes. We've been higher than competing states. So the governor recognized the need early, before he was even originally elected governor. He recognized the need to make some moves in this area, and he's taken us in 3 bites.
It's getting down to just 0.1% below what another competing state is. Is that enough? I mean, does that move the needle?
He tells a story publicly, so I'm not speaking out of turn here, but he tells a story of meeting with the Wall Street Journal editorial board. And he walked in the room, and Paul Gigot, the editor, said, "What's your top income tax rate?" And the governor said 6.9%. He said, 6.9? That's as high as Connecticut. And I think the governor, that sort of drove home the point for him that top rates matter, marginal rates matter, and we need to become more competitive with our, we're sandwiched between 2 no-tax states, Tennessee and Texas, and very often we're in competition with those states for business investment and business expansion, and it's tough when you've got that kind of marginal disadvantage.
There was a corporate tax cut that came through. That'll benefit a lot of trucking companies in the state of Arkansas. Can you not get around the corporate tax if you don't want to? I mean, can't you structure your business to avoid having to deal with corporate taxes?
Well,
You can run, but you can't hide.
Yeah. I think it may be lost a little bit that the individual income tax rate coming down actually helps small business and medium-sized business in
Exactly.
Arkansas. I know we went to our members. Of course, we were involved in the efforts on the corporate tax reform and the big publicly, C corps. Certainly, that was important to them. But many of the small, medium-sized trucking companies that are members of ours benefited from the individual income tax cut because that's they file as
Right.
LLCs or
it's passing through
pass-throughs,
somehow, right?
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of business entities in Arkansas are pass-through organizations. They're not C corps. Now, the C corps tend to be the big, high-number employers.
Right.
Walmart,
What about the
Tyson.
net operating loss carry forward? That went from 5 years to 8 years. How beneficial is that for your members?
That actually ranked on number one. I think we actually did a little bit of an informal polling amongst our members as we were looking at what's going to make the final bill. And as we had those options of potential reform components, the net operating loss, Arkansas being at 5 was, again, an outlier. If you look at, I think, most states, I think the federal has gone to no 20.
Yeah.
And several of the states around us had also extended to 10 or 20. And so us matching that, again, helps us not look so bad. And for our members, it's competing again. They're not moving. If you have a business and
you got a little bit of
have it,
infrastructure.
you're not
right?
leaving, and so they're competing directly with those companies that are based in other states, and so that's certainly
I
helpful.
see
to
Randy's
us.
already spending over there 10, 20 years. Yeah, I know where we're going next session.
Well,
So-
it's a bite at the apple, and there's still some more apple left. So
Right.
we'll deal with that down
Internet
the
sales
road.
tax, another big one right there too.
Huge one.
The Dakota decision had come down in
Vital.
between sessions, and so there was obviously a breakthrough moment in that.
Yeah.
How beneficial is that? What do you think that does for state coffers?
Well, number one, it's going to increase state sales tax revenue because sales tax that is due and owable on internet out-of-state, from internet out-of-state providers will indeed be collected and remitted to the state. Right now, if you don't have a physical nexus in the state, like a store or a warehouse, you can avoid the tax, but the person who made the purchase still owes the tax under the 1949 use tax law. So lots of us have basically and conveniently ignored our liability at the end of the year when all the stuff or much of the stuff we bought on the internet or through the internet.
Not me, Randy. I went and paid every
Oh,
penny.
I'm
so,
sure that's true,
well,
Roby. I'd like to see copies of that if you don't mind.
I
Just
will
to
release
verify.
my tax returns at the appropriate time.
Under
Right after the
duress.
president releases his tax returns.
Fair
there.
enough.
What will you guys be working on in the interim? What's number one priority for you between now and next legislative session?
I think we've still got work to do in workers' comp. One of the few disappointments in the session had to do with something pretty far down in the weeds around workers' comp system, but we've got room to improve that system. And there's always room to reduce or make more competitive our tax structure. So there's still some room there.
All right, Shannon, how about you?
Besides
working on a highway plan.
Yeah, I would say workers' comp is there as well. I still think there's some maybe unresolved issues on just the legal climate and the absence of any meaningful tort reform that's come out of this session or the efforts from the previous session. So that's something that still kind of lingers out there for us.
I think that'd be something that you'll be working on for legislation, or will that be something you'll be working on for constitutional amendment?
To be seen.
Yeah, I think both. Yes.
Yes, that's it. And the other thing that we
For
will
2020?
mostly be
2020?
focused on in the meantime is workforce. We simply have to improve our workforce preparation system for
Is tort
kids.
reform a 2020 ballot initiative, maybe?
Not going to pick that. Not going to bite on
With
that.
signatures, no, I
gonna
don't
bite
see
on that
anyone.
one.
You better do it before it gets too tough to pass
Hey.
ballot measures there. Randy, Zook, Shannon, Newton, thank you both so much. Always good
Sure.
to visit with you.
Good to see you.
We're back with more right after this word from our sponsors.